And welcome back to the Capitol Report. I'm Steve Lance. Markets responding to the potential of President Trump making a trade deal at his meeting with the Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping. Here now to discuss the implications of the president's visit is Republican Congressman Ron Estes. Congressman Ron Estes, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you with us, Congressman. So markets seem to be rallying ahead of President Trump's meeting with the Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping. Trump has mentioned preventing China's rare earth restrictions, export restrictions that would really disrupt global supply chains. We saw the way the market reacted when China floated that possibility. What's your outlook on that situation?
Yeah, it really was a disruptive thing when China said that several weeks ago. I mean, when we look at how critical rare earth minerals are for all the things we want to do going forward, it's so important that we have, and all countries, including China, follow free and fair trade practices. I mean, that's kind of the point that's made our economic engine in the world grow and continue to grow and continue to help individuals. So I think looking at President Trump's discussions with President Xi is looking at, how can we help make the economic ties between the United States and China stronger? How can we make sure that China practices those and follows those fair trade practices that we've talked about? And I also would hope that he would look and talk about fentanyl and some of the drug issues that are so devastating for so many of our American citizens.
Congressman, in February, President Trump did impose those tariffs on Beijing over their failure to curb fentanyl and the precursors that come out of China to make fentanyl. He says that China subsidizes companies producing those chemicals and is smuggling them into the United States through Venezuela. Has there been any improvement on this front, and what do you hope to see coming out of the current trade discussions with regard to fentanyl?
Yeah, I think the biggest improvement that we've seen so far is just the enforcement that President Trump's been putting on the border in terms of making sure that we don't have more people crossing the border illegally, and as a result, there's less fentanyl coming into the country through those means. But the overall practice that that China has in providing those precursors and or maybe providing fentanyl itself to actually use in the smuggling trade is not characteristic of what you would expect of a good trading partner. And so I am hopeful that as part of these discussions that China is willing to be engaged and say that it's important enough to the Chinese economy that they actually act like a fair trading partner so that we can address those issues and make sure that we minimize those negative consequences of things like smuggling.
Another issue I'd like to get your thoughts on is the issue of human rights. China recently detaining 30 Christian pastors and folks associated with them. The underground church has been persecuted in China for decades. You have the Falun Gong spiritual movement who has been targeted by this forced organ harvesting, allowing that to then spread to the Uyghur Muslim population. Any administration, not just the current one, tends to soften its criticism of China's human rights abuses because it is their third rail in order to, get them to sit at the table, because oftentimes they'll get up and walk away as soon as that is brought up. What is the cost of us sort of putting human rights on the back burner, and what more can any administration do to defend those being persecuted for their faith?
Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned, China has a long history of human rights abuses, for whether it's related to Christians, whether it's to the Falun Gong, or whether it's to the Uyghurs, but also just from a standpoint of slave trade practices and using that in their economy. And as you said in the past, a lot of companies, a lot of leadership in whether it's the United States or in other countries around the world have backed away because China's objected to bringing up commentary about their human rights abuses. President Trump hasn't done that. I mean, he's been willing to stand up and say, we need to make sure that that good practices are followed, and been willing to push forth some of his tariffs and some of his other leading points on trade. to actually make sure that some of these unfair practices are addressed. And so I look forward to having some good dialogue when they meet. And ultimately, I do think it'll take a long time because some of these things I think are built into the Chinese economy, and they may have to figure out that in their own best interest is to agree to head in a right direction and act the same way that we would expect our trade partners to react, and if we want to have trading partners that are considered most favored nation status.
It would be quite a spectacle if President Trump did raise human rights issues in the public sphere, given the fact that he is a leader like none other. I think we just have to acknowledge that in terms of when he speaks, the world listens. We saw that in Argentina, perhaps, in their recent election. So perhaps it would send earthquakes shaking, tremors throughout communist China with regard to human rights.
Yeah, I think it really is. President Trump's he knows there's going to be heat. I mean, just like other presidents knew there were going to be heat, but they didn't address it, whereas President Trump's been willing to step up and say he was willing to take the slings and arrows, if you would, in terms of the criticisms that would come at him. But he was willing to address and focus on what's the right thing to do.
Certainly, this president has confronted communist China like no other president that we have ever seen. Congressman Ron Estes, greatly appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.